When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ludlow, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, everybody. This is Mark Ludlow, the host of the Fearless Mindset Podcast. I have a good friend of mine on today. His name is Nick Berberian from that place called the Bay Area, and he loves his area up there, and he's doing a great job there at AAA at Walnut Creek, head of physical security, and he's also a Marine, so don't hold that against him either. And he's got a sword there in this. You can see in the camera that he's got a sword, so he's like a Marine Corps samurai guy. He's dead. Right. He's got deadly fingers.
Those are my samurai swords, Mark. I got those from Japan, actually.
You did?
About 20 plus years ago.
20 plus years ago?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have to go through Amazon? Oh, you said you went to Japan to get them. I
did. I don't think Amazon was selling samurai swords back then.
I don't think so either.
No.
Yeah. Well, that guy that got busted, you see the guy got robbed yesterday on Facebook or whatever? There's a truck, I think at Santa Monica, blue truck parked on the side of the street. The truck is getting robbed.
Right.
I saw it. He's a sword for self-defense.
I guess he was fearless at that point, wasn't he, Mark?
I think he was running the other direction. Bob, you can have it. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Hey, that's why we have insurance, right? That's why we have insurance. It's not worth the fight. Not worth the fight.
Yeah, so to introduce Nick, he started his career in the Marine Corps, of course. He did that, and you did a 4-year contract or 5-year?
4 years, yep.
4 years. And you're kind of banker hours. You worked for the Air Wing, EMT?
So not banker's hours, but yeah, I was a winger, man. You can't tell by still rocking the high and tight, But I was actually crash crew, so no banker's hours. I was actually the equivalent of crash fire rescue, so basically a Marine Corps firefighter and medic.
So you're an EMT, combat EMT trained?
That is correct, absolutely.
Oh, I thought you told me that. Okay. So you enjoyed that? That kind of set up the rest of your life just for that experience and everything you did there?
Going into the Marines at 18, you kind of, you have a dream of what you want to do. And most folks like myself go into the military right out of high school because they don't want to go to school. They want to actually do something, be involved, and actually have some kind of action for that matter. And I wanted to go into the military and have a job where I would fulfill my roles, right? Because, upon signing the dotted line for the Marine Corps, I was faced with two options: security forces or crash crew, which would lead me to a direction after the fact.
That's smart.
But when I joined in 99, we were, 2 years before 9/11. My crystal ball wasn't quite working. So I wanted a job that I would not just train in, but actually provide life-saving techniques and actually do my job, not just at that point train for a job. So hindsight, maybe I would have switched careers to security forces if it was post 9/11 timeframe when I signed. But that was the route. I'm glad I did. Next to our special operations folks, I think our crash crew folks get quite a bit of respect.
Sure. So were you intentionally going to, once you got out of the Marine Corps, were your hopes and dreams to become a firefighter, structure firefighter with the department or something like that?
So I finished my tour of active duty in California the last year and a half or so, and I was able to obtain all my California certifications, Firefighter 2, and along with my Department of Defense certifications. I was on the list for a few fire departments out here, but that was right during the cutbacks, the good old Gray Davis cutbacks, and where they're chopping fire departments and law enforcement. And so I was on a list for both the city of Oakland and county of Contra Costa. And, at the time of getting out, I was a new dad and needed money and, had to venture into one direction to start earning revenue. So that's why I ended up going into security.
Oh, okay. Now it all makes sense. because Nick and we met, I forget what year was that when we met. That's like, what, 10 plus years ago, at least?
I want to say somewhere between 2008, 9, maybe, or 10 or so. Yeah, it's been over 10 years for sure.
Wow. We're dating ourselves.
Yeah. I started when I was 14. So,
I think it was 13.
There you go.
Yeah, Nick and I met. We're standing at post at a nurses' strike for Nick's former company, and we're doing strike security for a hospital. And we called him Fabio back then. That was his nickname, Fabio.
And, good old Horsley. Good old David Horsley gave that nickname. Yeah.
Peter. Yeah, he was the, we called him the general. He goes,
that's right.
Hey, Fabio, come over here. See that reporter? Go get some intel for us.
Yeah. And we got Starbucks.
Reporters.
We got some free Starbucks out of it too from them. So it all worked out.
I remember that.
Yep.
All from the TV station.
That's absolutely correct.
Public relations and EP, you would never think would go together.
They go hand in hand. Absolutely.
Yeah, good old times. Yeah, then after that, you were working for many companies just to pay the bills, and then at that point, I think a few years after that, you were offered a job with GS3, and you got promoted, and then to a management type role. So you went from operator to manager within a period of a few years. What was that transition like for you mentally, going from agent mindset to, now I'm in charge of a bunch of people?
Right. So, being in the Marines, you're used to being thrown in leadership roles, but just kind of looking at the mindset as the transition and prior to the transition that took place, like you said, I was working for several different companies. I mean, I was doing anywhere from nightclub security a couple times here. I was monitoring cameras for a corporation, all contract part-time work. I did a couple overseas jobs. One of the final jobs I did was a maritime security prior to my transition. And I was literally working in a job on a ship where I was in a hole, guarding an empty bay with dim light, literally nothing in there. 12 hours a day for well over 30 days. And the whole time I'm sitting there, this is probably the mindset of a lot of folks as they get to a point of potential transition, is you're sitting there thinking to yourself, is this what I really want to do with myself? Right? When you have these long hours, you're standing by yourself, nobody's coming to visit you, dark room, 12 hours, halls and walls duty, right? You really start to sit and think and wonder, is this all that security can provide? And you start looking at it, and there's so much more to physical security over, standing a post, or even working as a director of operations for a firm, or head of security for a large organization, that there are many different avenues that at that time I was unaware of. And it just so happened that was right at the timing where GS3 was looking for a director of operations. And the timing worked out perfect because I was away from my family for about a month plus. And I was a single dad at that time, and took my daughter on a trip. It was it just happened to be her spring break, and we went to Disneyland. And it was just one of those where it was so nice to be home, right, after being away from your family for so long. And that's right when the conversation started. And it was an interesting decision to make, right? Because you go from a job where I just made, $15,000 a month to a job that's not going to pay me that much money. And the 3 months leading up to that, I made a significant amount of money that the job offer wasn't, going to be able to offer. But you had to really take the mindset of what's going to be beneficial for me in the long run. What's going to be better for my career? Staying in the position of being contract is beneficial on the months where you're working, but there are months where you may not work as much. There were months where I've made a couple $100 where I only worked a couple shifts at a, part-time at a job while waiting for another contract to come. That's concerning when you have bills and family to take care of and so forth. And so the decision for me was entirely based on something. I wanted to go into something steady. Even though it was a pay cut, it was consistent. I knew how much money I could make. I knew that I could, lay a foundation at wherever I was at because I was going to be there for a while. And so it's really going to be dependent on, where you are in your life at that time. I mean, if you're young, you're single, you love traveling all over the place, being an agent for you is probably very ideal because you get to do the sexy stuff. You get to be involved in the cool guy stuff. You know what I mean? And then you transition, you're still involved in the cool guy stuff, but you're the guy behind the scenes and your team is the ones that are legit cool guys in there.
Talking about that, as you explain that, my wheels are starting to turn about how I learned as a solo practitioner or an EP agent working for multiple companies. A lot of guys make that fast cash. They may make $10,000, $15,000 for a detail for 1 month. And then they go get that money and they spend it all the next month to buy a brand new car. And this business, it's feast or famine.
That's right.
Especially COVID-19. No one's moving from A to B. No EP team. All EP teams are grounded. So if I'm an operator out there, a protective agent, I'm going to probably want to budget my money. Did you have to figure that out early on before you were offered that position?
Absolutely. I always looked at it from the perspective, it's actually 3 jobs you have to work, right? You've got to get the contract itself. So you got to have the connections. You got to be able to get the offer to work on a project. That's the one part of it. Then you've got to actually work the project, which is the only time you're actually being paid for. And depending on who you worked for, that third part could mean you're fighting to get paid for the job that you just worked. And so while you made a significant amount of money per project and so forth, it really felt like you had to do 3 jobs to get paid for the one in the middle. And so, it definitely required budgeting. I used to have spreadsheets and everything, trying to identify which companies I worked for by month and pay from each one. And then, I used it as an aggregate to average out and kind of set my living standards based on that as well.
I know most of the EP agents, bodyguards, or protective agents, they make that money and then they just blow it the next month, and then they're begging somebody to get work. But you have to be cognitive of, you don't know when the next detail will come. And with COVID-19, they're saying 2021, maybe they may have vaccine or therapies to help treat these viruses. And
right.
If you don't have that cash reserved to, pay your bills for the next quarter, you're going to be hurting.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's very tempting when you get paid out, 10, 15,000, especially when you haven't had to come out of pocket any money to buy a new car, buy some new firearms. Now don't get me wrong. There are things that you should spend that money on, right? Like attire, making sure you have a nice fitted suit, making sure you have nice shoes, comfortable shoes that also look nice as well. Good equipment so that when you are standing a post, you look professional, right? And so there are certain things that agents should invest in, right? You got to invest in yourself a little bit as well. But the big purchase items, buying the Rolex and buying the cars right away after you just finish one contract is probably, not the best move to make at that time.
Would you recommend pay down your debts first before you start spending money?
I mean, that's an obvious, right? You got to make sure that you remove those liabilities, or you're going to have that hovering over your head for, the compounding interest on debt is enormous to the point where, it's responsible to pay it down. It's responsible to balance. Like, for example, you have a $6,000 credit card debt. You don't want to spend $6,000 of your $7,000 on your credit card debt because that's not going to leave you with anything. So, like with anything in life, balance is extremely important.
Now, when you got to the corporate world, you're managing or you're operations director for GS3. So you go to that mindset of that position. What was the struggle from that to being an agent on the ground? What was it more a middle struggle to fill jobs around the world and working your rear end off to death?
Yeah, I mean, A, B, and C. You're definitely working. I would say, at the time that I got the role as a director of operations there, I was really young. right? And so you're looking at an environment where a lot of the agents are seasoned veterans. You have a lot of prior law enforcement, a lot of really seasoned operators who are working on these details and are working for you. So understanding how to not demand respect, but earn respect from your team and those that you're going to lead, I think is extremely important. You're not going to be able to get them to move for you if they don't respect you, right? And respect is earned in various ways. And I would say having that respect is probably one of the key success factors for that role. Is you got to respect your team. You got to earn respect and not demand respect from your team. And granted, I mean, the long hours, you're director of operations, there is no sleep, right? You're working, you have clients in the Middle East, you have clients around the world in Asia. There isn't a 9 to 5 schedule. And emergencies don't happen between 9 to 5. Your emergencies happen, 2300 on a Friday night when you're just out with some buddies and you get a call. That's when they happen. So, understanding that, you do want to go out and have some drinks with your friends. That's fantastic. Know that, as luck would have it, you're going to get a call during that time. So making sure you always keep a level head, knowing that your job is not 9 to 5. You always got to make sure you're squared away 24/7.
I used to call you on the phone and call you the on-call EP operations doctor.
That's right. Yes, Mr. Fix-It. Absolutely.
So you get random calls, especially if, like they always say, plan a trip to go somewhere and your phone will ring off the hook.
That's right.
Especially in our industry.
Absolutely.
So now you went from that position with GS3 and then you got offered a job with AAA. You were at GS3 for about 7 years, right?
Right.
And then you offered you a position that you had a relationship with that person at AAA for a while. They saw you in action.
Yeah. I mean, an advantage of working as an enterprise in the enterprise security is you're working with dozens to hundreds of clients, right? And so you develop relationships with either potential employers or potential counterparts. And prior to this, I actually did quite a bit of work for both. The AAA is kind of divided up as club and insurance. And I provided support for both of them from a threat management perspective at that time. And so essentially the role I fulfilled was essentially the initial intake call. Whenever there were threats of violence or other elevated security concerns, they would reach out to us. I would be the point person, take the intake, do the evaluation, assessment, and interviews, and provide consult and essentially help structure the response to these types of concerns. And so I did already have a relationship with them prior to coming on board. I would say that that's extremely helpful to have that warm introduction because you already get an idea of the person's mentality, right? It's really hard in this industry to understand if somebody's going to mesh well in a corporate environment just based on, being too much of a hard charger or not, right? And so having that warm introduction was very helpful with me assimilating into the organization. And quite honestly, they really welcomed me with open arms. And, when I first came on board, I was sitting there and it was like the first month I was asking everybody, I was like, are people actually this nice for reals? Or are you just doing this because this is my first month on? And, second month comes on and third month and everybody's still extremely friendly. And it's a world of difference when you go to that corporate environment as where you come from. It's an environment where, time is money. Every time somebody calls you, it's an emergency, and so there's a lot higher stress, a lot higher demand, a lot more, I wouldn't say threats and concerns because you're dealing with a number of clients. And so AAA really was very welcoming, and no knock to GS3. I love them. I think it was phenomenal, but you can tell the difference between an organization that's ran by a bunch of Marines and one that's located in California, and so it was understanding that dynamics and understanding who they were prior to starting was very, very helpful.
Yeah, and Craig, he's got give props to Craig at GS3. he got me started too at GS3 doing strike work, and he's put a lot of money in my pocket over the years. And he's a Marine. He's worked hard in the business, and definitely one of the respectful leaders in the business for sure.
I agree. Yeah,
out there for him.
Yeah, and I think to kind of piggyback on that point, I still have a really, really good working relationship with GS3. They're still one of our vendors. We still use them to this day on projects. And that's, I guess, a segue into don't burn bridges. You know what I mean? Just because you don't work for a company anymore doesn't mean you're never going to need them again, because this industry is very, very small. You'll run into somebody, I'll give an example all the time. We were working on a project, Superstorm Sandy.
Yeah.
I got burned. One of the agents out there burned me. Was supposed to show up, no show. The place ended up getting looted. It was a very, very terrible situation. Fast forward about 18 months later, I'm doing a project down in Florida, and they're giving me the list of names of the agents that are working on it. And I'm looking at it and I was like, wait a minute. I recognize this name, and asked them a few questions. Where are they located? Are they from New Jersey area? And the answers were all yes. And sorry, can't have them on this job. Won't have them work for us. So,
lost your trust and ability to do the mission.
Absolutely. And
for those young people, youngsters, or the new generation coming in the EP industry, listen to those words Nick just told us about. I know a lot of you guys are listening to this podcast. Don't burn your bridges, because there'll come a time when you're not going to be working, and you need to go back to that bridge again to get a couple of bucks to pay your bills.
Absolutely.
And make you pissed off and say stupid stuff on Facebook or the private groups, and throw out your mud on Facebook private, wall, whatever. It's so not worth it. Sometimes it's better not to say anything. And just
absolutely.
Nick and I joke. I think I've had 10 funerals in my whole career in the EP business. Anybody who's been shot and killed the most is me.
That's right.
You get busy and you're hustling. We call it industry envy, and I've been a victim of that. But
absolutely,
haters will always hate.
That's right. Hey, and you're still here, Mark, and looking good, man. Looking good. Yeah, good for you. Absolutely.
As we say in the Marine Corps, overcome and adapt and keep pressing on.
That's right.
Bullets keep coming at you. You just got to dodge the bullets. But yeah, appreciate that. But yeah, as you're saying, so that guy burned the bridge, and you said, no way, I'm not letting him on after he did what he did at Operation Sandy.
Absolutely. And it was a fairly decent contract. It was a 2-week contract. He probably would have walked away with, anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000 by the time he was done with it. And, you burn a bridge once, you never know who's going to be your employer. You never know if one of those people will become a corporate security leader, and you may want employment at that place at some time, or work there as an agent. It's a really, really small industry. And anything bad you do will get spread like wildfire, especially here in California.
Oh, yeah.
If you do something fantastic, more than likely nobody's going to notice. Maybe somebody will, but I guarantee you mess up once, everybody's going to talk about it. If you show up in I love the ones where it's supposed to be a black suit attire, and you have somebody with some purple pinstripes and a dragon on their back of their suit with flamboyant shoes to go with it, and people remember that. Listen, but if the instructions weren't clear about the attire, that's the person's fault giving the instructions. So, it could go two ways, right? But those things are never forgotten, unfortunately.
I got to share this. I'm not going to disclose who this was for, but it was in Silicon Valley. I was on a WhatsApp thread. There was about 20 people on the thread. We're all looking at the thread, then all of a sudden, I get a text message. Hey, Mark, did you see the thread? The picture? I'm like, huh? I look at it. Somebody was on the thread, accidentally, somehow, a lady, whoever that lady was, in the shower. It popped on the thread. Like, huh, why is this lady taking a shower in our thread? Who's this from? And so if you're on these operations and stuff, make sure you're keeping that stuff separate. Yeah,
absolutely.
Private stuff is your private stuff. But needless to say, that I think that guy was gone in 2 days. Or that day, he was termed. And I was like, huh? Whoa, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Say what rating it was. We'll keep it kind of G-rated for this show, but things like that do happen.
Absolutely.
And they use communication threads like WhatsApp and different threads like that. It can be a recipe for disaster.
Agreed. 100%.
So you got to be very careful of your SOPs and communication devices and stuff like that. But yeah, that just kind of brought back a memory being on the ground down in Silicon Valley and helping run a team over there. But so you mentioned the some good positives about AAA, about the switch from corporate or GS3 to AAA. What have been the negatives that you miss about the private sector compared to AAA?
Well, private sector's sexy, Mark. There's you're dealing with multiple clients, right? And so we handled, mining organizations out of South America and Africa, and we would get operations where we would really be in some austere environments. One of the things I slightly miss, I don't miss the hours, but I'd wake up, I would be on the treadmill by 5 o'clock in the morning. I would watch some riot taking place or some shooting that was deemed unjustified. And so I would see that at 5 o'clock. I would reach out to my contacts in the media. Not going to list any names, but I had 2 contacts that we worked with. And by the time my workout was over, I got a green light to send some folks to Charlottesville or to New Orleans or something along those lines. And so it's interesting being a part of current events, right? Where you're actually involved in seeing something on the news or seeing something take place and directly responding to it and having a support system through Hurricane, Superstorm Sandy. I mean, we responded to almost every natural disaster over the last 15 years. And so that part, I would say you miss a little bit, right? What you don't necessarily miss is working 72 hours straight because you're trying to staff 156 people in a disaster zone and prop up critical infrastructure. That part's a little stressful, but it makes for really, really good stories after you're done with it.
Yeah, thanks for your help for the Puerto Rico disaster. You helped us on that one. I think, what do we have, like 20 guys out there or something like that?
Yeah, at one point. Yeah, it was pretty good. Absolutely.
I'd say, hey, Nick, what should we do here? Oh, do this and this. Call them. Hey, what should we do here? Do this and like it saved us a lot of heartache later, financial heartache.
Absolutely.
Definitely a good advisor on that project.
Absolutely. It was an interesting one. It's a lot. I mean, every disaster you go into is going to be different. There's different unique vulnerabilities and concerns. That one especially was unique given its location and isolation.
Right.
But, in general, I want to say that there was a lot of good operations that were conducted, and there were a lot of lessons that were learned as well.
Absolutely. Now the big question is, you're at AAA, and we know we got some issues going on right now. What is your biggest pain in your rear end right now?
I think you could just put a COVID stamp on everything right now as the primary focus on, what every corporate security leader, safety and security leader is dealing with right now. And I want to say that the more important part is to make sure we don't take our eye off what's important as well. We still have our regular functions. We're still in operations. Our business isn't shut down. You have other things that balance out as well. While we don't have necessarily travel going on, execs aren't meeting in person. They're not traveling, doing speaking engagements. Everything has, for all, if not most responsible organizations, they've either eliminated completely or drastically reduced any type of travel or in-person engagements. And so while you have that removal of a concern, you have an additional concern because now you have right now a significant number of your employees who are working from home, which poses its own unique concerns in addition to the direct impact of COVID and the sickness and things that are associated with it, the secondary effects such as employees that are sheltered in place for months on end with potentially abusive partners, right? You have what we've seen, not just internally, but speaking with our law enforcement counterparts, is a huge spike in domestic violence cases. You're you're not only seeing a huge spike in domestic violence cases, but there's also a huge number of domestic violence cases that are going unreported because people are in a situation where they may not have anywhere to go. Normally in these situations, somebody could get up and go move with their parents. If, depending on the health of their parents, the location, safety concerns, that's not an option for a lot of people. So you have a lot of people who are in a position that would like to get out, that may not necessarily know how to get out. And so from a corporate standpoint, we try to provide resources without directly saying, hey, I know our employees are being assaulted at home in higher numbers and not reporting them, but here are some solutions. So it's a good communications balance, obviously working with communications team to make it in a format that people want to read and want to engage and try to find these resources to make their situation better. So those are all the secondary impacts from COVID that may get overlooked many times because we're all focused on keeping our employees and our facilities safe. Obviously COVID in itself presents its own unique concerns, ensuring that employees are not only following local guidelines, but company guidelines with face masks, face coverings, I should say, social distancing, making sure you have the right support and you're providing the correct information to your employees, right? I think you're going to see a lot of lawsuits for organizations who aren't taking this serious. Fortunately for us, our executives take this very, very serious. This is something that we spend a significant amount of our time ensuring that we're doing it properly. And, one thing I give us credit for, I feel like we've been one step ahead of most organizations the whole time during this response. We held our risk team held our first COVID pandemic planning back in January. And so we started rolling these procedures out far ahead of what my counterparts were doing. And I think that gave us a real advantage to where it came time to the shelter in place, because we already had things in place and we're ready to go, which is all learning as well too, because as things were going in, timelines extended, we had to modify, we had to adjust how we monitor certain guidelines that we're going to put into effect. And so, there's a balance that we're trying to provide. And while COVID seems to be taking a lot of energy and a lot of focus from our team, we're still keeping our eye on the ball and focusing on the other secondary vulnerabilities that are occurring, such as the domestic violence increase in threats. You're looking at increased hostilities. Again, when we roll back into our back to office plan, that's a concern on how we roll them back, because, when we get a vaccine, it's not the automatic green light, we go back to work, right? There's a lot of other responsibilities and things that we need to be aware of before we can go back to a complete back to office plan. And with that is you're dealing with a population who's been sheltered in place for almost a year. How is it going to be integrating people back together in close proximity in a work environment again, and the hostilities that are involved? And fortunate, we work for a very pleasant organization, but everybody's seen on the news the concerns and the violence that's escalated because of folks that may not be wearing their mask correctly, people that aren't social distancing, certain things that have been triggers for folks that we have to be cognizant of and plan prior to that time for those occurrences.
Now, sounds like you strictly deal with the employees. Now, do you have much interaction with the customers, with their insurance or claims? Are you guys seeing an increase in vehicle damage because of the rioting and around the country? Or what's that looking like for you guys?
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily a customer focused. My customers are our employees, vendors, and facilities, and so forth. Okay. The only time I really get involved with insureds is if it is something that escalates to a threat or an elevated concern. We have seen a reduction. Obviously, there's a lot less people on the road. There's a lot less vehicle accidents that are going to occur. I can't speak on any specifics of what those numbers look like. I can tell you, because of the fact that there is a reduction of people on the road, that there is a reduction in claims. But the instances where I get involved are in the event that those claims or a concern from an insured or a claimant escalate to a verbal threat or potential threat of physical violence as well.
Okay, fair enough. Now, hey, I got to congratulate you on being a board member of ATAP. And you've been there, what, a year? That's
right.
Okay. And that's a pretty significant organization in the security industry. And what's the ins and outs of being a board member over there? What's that all look like?
It's more work than it looks like, you know. I think for me, I really enjoy the content that's delivered in ATAP. I think the organization is very well run. I believe the creators of ATAP, the original people that started ATAP, really put a lot of thought into the public-private partnership and how we can utilize resources to help mitigate these threats, share ideas, discuss cases that may help somebody in their case, and in the end, understand that every case is going to be different, but it gives you a network of folks that you can reach out to. For example, I'm not a psychologist, right? We deal with a lot of threat cases that deal with mental health, mental illness, right? And so once we've determined that it's either been verified or believed to have some kind of mental illness, we bring in a psychologist. We bring in actually Dr. Kaywood, phenomenal. He's our go-to for these specialized assessments. So, it's without this network, without these groups, specifically being in corporate security, it's really hard to understand where to go to unless you're involved with these organizations. There's a lot of good training that comes out of it. The annual Threat Management Conference in Anaheim is a phenomenal network for you to gain information, develop a network, and maybe even develop into a certified threat manager at some point.
And that's a certificate test you have to take, or a class you attend to get that certification?
It's a certification exam that's based on certain requirements. You have to meet a certain number of requirements to sit for the exam. So you have to apply for it, very similar to the CPP. And so the difference between, I would say, the CTM and CPP is obviously they're both board certified in either threat management or security management. And so, CPPs have, there's a significant number of CPPs that you can go through additional training. There's a lot more resources. Certified threat managers, I'm not sure the exact number, but I think there's less than 200, just slightly over 100 that have actually across the globe that have this certification. And so in order to become a certified threat manager, you're literally giving a list of 12 college-sized books, another dozen publications to read, and obviously understand the body of knowledge that the test is going to be based on, and that's what you're given. Will there be some study guides in the future? Perhaps, but I think that it's, between the two of them, right, you're looking at both two great certifications that are extremely valuable and significant in their own separate way, that not only provides you with some professional certification, some professional, yes, this is a verification that you know this, but I would say even more important than the actual certification and those fancy letters next to your name is the process to obtaining it. Because you may qualify to sit for the exam. For example, the CPP requires 9 years of experience or, some kind of combination of a few other things. And in that process of studying for the CPP, I absorbed so much and gained probably as much knowledge, if not more so, than I knew going into it, which really helped make our security program much more well-rounded. And similarly with our Certified Threat Manager program, it requires you to read and to actually study and to focus and to find keys and points and understand a philosophy, which in turn helps you and makes you better at your job. So, it's not
audience sake, but you do have your CPP. You just got that not too long ago, correct?
That's correct. Yes, I got that. And thank you. Yeah, I got
big deal for you.
Pardon?
It's a big deal for you to get that.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, it's fantastic for, career-wise. It's justification to say I am board certified in security management, which is very helpful for existing organization. If you want to lateral to another organization, it's helpful. A lot of companies require that as a minimum if you don't meet the college requirements. But again, I want to say for me, what I gained most about it was the journey and studying part of it. And really the notes that I took during my readings and reading those books, I use as guides now. And I create those guides in the policies, and I create those guides in the procedures. And so I've developed a couple programs just out of studying that we use internally at AAA. So it was extremely valuable.
Are those standard operating procedure manual type things that you've developed?
So we have internal policies and then internal standards that we use. And then for our security team, we have SOPs. So we have guidance that we use that's enterprise-wide for policies. We have standards that are more specifically related to smaller sections of groups, and then SOPs for our officers that are all created based on the study and information provided in both the CTM and CPP.
You're a walking security genius.
Man, I've said this before. I humble myself, and from many of the greats in the industry. There's I think I told you this before, but there are so many intelligent, experienced, seasoned operators and security professionals that to want to consider yourself as one of the best, I think would be a far stretch, just given the pool of people that's out there.
There's so much to learn. You're always learning in this business.
Absolutely. I agree. If you're not learning
business,
if you're not learning daily, weekly, if you're not setting milestones,
right.
Chances are you're going to get passed over. You're not going to be up to date. If you're the head of security for an organization, you could potentially be putting your organization at liability if you're not staying on top of everything. And so it's not just for a professional, but it's, you have a responsibility in this role. You have a responsibility to keep your team safe, your employees safe, your company protected. And if you're not staying up to date with information, there is a very, very good chance that you're putting your company in some liability and potential lawsuits or concerns in the future.
That's a very good point for the listeners out there. Just because you're head of security, there's with much responsibility comes much, background, and you got to take care of those people that you support.
Absolutely.
But yeah. So you got your CPP. Was that about a year ago or 6 months ago?
February. I took the test in February for the CPP. CTM I took last October. So it's been within the last 12 months I took both exams. And, I think when you get in the mindset, something like the fearless mindset, you put your head down. You put your head down, and you just, it was almost like when I ran my first marathon. It was like training for it sucked. But after you run the first one, you're kind of like, I could do this. I'm going to do more. I'm just going to keep going. So if you've got the mindset, if you're in the study mindset, just keep going until you can't anymore, and keep obtaining those certifications and gaining more knowledge. And staying on top of it, to maintain these certifications requires your continuing education credits. So an added benefit is you have to continue to learn to maintain these certifications. Continue
to train, keep the mind fresh.
Absolutely.
Well, Nick, I just want to thank you for your time. We hit 40 minutes on this thing, and I knew you could do it.
Right on.
And for all the advice and your future in entertainment and radio broadcasting is around the corner.
As long as I don't show my face every time, I'm good, man. I'm good.
But yeah, Nick comes to us from AAA, former Marine and veteran, and he's the guy over there in Walnut Creek running operations nationwide at AAA. And this is Mark Ledlow with the Fearless Mindset podcast. It's a little tongue twister there. And that will conclude it today. And thanks for your time, Nick, and we'll catch you on the next go around.